A man is on his knees in a cell in Babylon. His hands are trembling as he confesses. Daniel, the same man who survived the lions, now faces something worse, the truth about himself. And in that confession, he discovers how God decides our fate. There is a system, a precise mechanism that governs how God treats us. And Daniel is about to discover it in the most painful way possible. Babylon, 538 BC. The empire that destroyed Jerusalem is about to fall. Daniel is over 80 years old. He has spent his entire life in exile, and now, alone in his cell, he does something few men have the courage to do. He takes upon himself the collective guilt of his people. "We have sinned." The words come out like stones from his throat. "We have done wrong and acted wickedly." Daniel is not confessing personal sins. He carries on his shoulders the weight of generations, corrupt kings, murdered prophets, a desecrated temple, a covenant betrayed so many times that God had to let Jerusalem burn. And then Daniel says something devastating. "To you, O Lord, belongs righteousness, but to us, open shame." Daniel discovered that shame has a geography. It maps exactly where we have betrayed the covenant. If this perspective has helped you see your own failings differently, consider marking this video. It is a powerful form of acknowledgement. The word Daniel uses has no perfect counterpart in English. Bosheth. It is a shame that paralyzes, that keeps a man from lifting his face, that sears the skin like a hot iron. Daniel repeats it 3 times, as if needing to carve the weight of what he feels into the stone of his cell. To those who are near, and to those who are far off. The exile scattered the Jewish people like ashes in the wind. Egypt, Babylon, Persia, each family carrying the same shame, the same weight, the same question: does God still hear us? But Daniel does something extraordinary. In the middle of the most humiliating confession imaginable, his tone shifts. "But to you, O Lord our God, belong mercy and forgiveness." How can a man speak of mercy when he is drowning in shame? How can he believe in forgiveness when he carries the weight of generations of betrayal? Daniel sensed something, a principle, a spiritual law that governs how God deals with us, but he cannot quite put it into words. It just hangs there, waiting in the air of the cell. True faith leaves a trace, and Daniel's trace is this confession, which has traveled 2,500 years to reach us. Centuries later, on a hill in Galilee, a carpenter is about to reveal what Daniel had only sensed. The disciples are gathered tightly around him. The sermon has already lasted for hours, but no one leaves. There is something in this man's voice that holds them more securely than ropes. Jesus looks at the faces around him. Fishermen, tax collectors, women the society had cast aside, people who knew shame just as Daniel did. And then he drops the bombshell. "Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful." The sentence lands like a stone in a still lake. To be merciful as God is that humanly possible? But Jesus has not finished. What comes next is the revelation of the system Daniel had sensed. "Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven." Jesus is about to reveal what Daniel had sensed but could not yet name. Pay close attention to what comes next. The structure of the sentence is surgical. Each human action has a direct divine consequence. This is not a threat. It is spiritual physics. Jesus is revealing how the moral universe works. And then comes the part no one expected. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. The word measure appears 3 times in 2 sentences. This is not by chance. It is the key to understanding the entire system. Jesus uses the image of a merchant in the marketplace. The measure is the standard container for grain, but a generous merchant does something special. He fills the measure, presses it down with his hands to fit more in, shakes it to settle the grain, and keeps pouring until it overflows. Now comes the full revelation. For with the same measure you use, it will be measured to you. There it is, the system, the mechanism, the spiritual law that Daniel sensed but could not name. We choose the measure. We decide if God will use with us a cup or an ocean. Every judgment we make is calibrating the measure God will use with us. Every condemnation we pronounce is defining the terms of our own judgment. Every time we refuse to forgive, we are turning off the tap of divine mercy over our own lives. But the reverse is also true, and here is the hope that Daniel glimpsed. Every act of mercy expands the measure. Every forgiveness offered makes more room in the divine container. Every time we give of our time, our attention, our compassion, a second chance, we are literally enlarging the lap where God will pour out His blessings. True faith leaves a trace, and the trace here is the measure we choose to use. The overflowing lap is the most violent image of generosity in the Gospel. Lap, kolpos in Greek, is the fold of the tunic at the chest, where people in the ancient world would carry things. Jesus is saying that God will fill this fold so full that you will not be able to hold it all, but only if you choose the right measure. What Daniel confessed on his knees, Jesus revealed on his feet. The system was always this. The shame Daniel carried could be turned into glory. He just had to change the measure. Where in your life are you using the wrong measure, and you know it? Answer with honesty. What judgment do you repeat every day that is calibrating your own destiny? Psalm 78 arrives as a confirmation of what we have just discovered. It is a psalm of remembrance, the people recalling their betrayals. But notice how it begins. Do not remember against us our former iniquities. The psalmist understood the system. If God uses the measure of pure justice, we are lost. So he asks God to change the measure. Let your compassion come speedily to meet us. The psalm does something unsettling. It portrays God as the shepherd of a flock condemned to death. With your mighty arm set free those who are doomed to die. Condemned by whom? By their own judgments. Trapped by the measure they chose to use. But the psalm ends with hope. But we, your people, the sheep of your pasture, will give thanks to you forever. Transformation is possible. The measure can be changed. The lap can overflow. But it requires a decision. Let us return to Daniel, still on his knees, still trembling. But something has changed. The confession has made space. The shame once named has begun to dissolve. And Daniel did something that would change history. He chose to keep praying. 3 times a day, his window opened toward Jerusalem. Even when the royal decree forbade it, even when the lions were waiting, Daniel changed his measure. Instead of measuring God by the destruction of Jerusalem, he measured him by the promise of restoration. Instead of measuring the Babylonians by the exile, he measured them by the opportunity for witness. Instead of measuring himself by his shame, he measured himself by mercy. And God answered with the same measure. He shut the mouths of the lions. He revealed dreams. He preserved his servant until he saw the first group of exiles return to Jerusalem. The spiritual physics worked exactly as Jesus would reveal centuries later. What measure have you been using? Think of someone specific, that person you judge in the same way every time. What would happen if you changed the measure today? The application is surgical. Choose one person, just one, the one you have been measuring with the harshest ruler. For the next 7 days, consciously change the measure. Where you looked for error, look for effort. Where you saw malice, consider a wound. Where you counted faults, count the times they have overcome. Document what happens, not in the other person, but inside of you. How your own lap begins to expand. How the weight begins to shift. How the measure you offer begins to be returned to you. Because the system is real. The spiritual physics work. And you can begin that change right now. Daniel died in exile. He never saw Jerusalem rebuilt. But he died with an overflowing lap, full of visions, revelations, and the certainty that he had chosen the right measure. True faith leaves a trace. And the greatest trace we can leave is the measure we choose to use. If you have felt the weight of this truth, if you realize you have been calibrating your own judgment, then subscribing here is more than clicking a button. It is a commitment to continue changing your measure. The system that Daniel sensed and Jesus revealed is still at work. Every judgment calibrates. Every forgiveness expands. Every measure we use comes back multiplied. The question that remains is simple and devastating. What measure do you want God to use with you? The answer lies in what you do with the measure you use today. The video now appearing on your screen takes this same tension between justice and mercy into new territory. The journey is worth continuing.